Toss a coin to your Witcher. Welcome back to the channel, guys. 2 years we've waited for this, but Netflix have dropped season 2 of The Witcher. Came out on Friday morning, 8 o'clock over here in the UK. I binge watched all 8 episodes, and I've got a lot to say about it. The good and the bad, so strap yourself in. Obviously there will be spoilers ahead, but this won't be an in-depth analysis, as I've only watched the episodes once. And if we talked about each of the episodes in one video, breaking it all down, we could be here for 2 or 3 hours. But for now, this is just my initial thoughts and feelings for Netflix The Witcher Season 2. And like I said, lots to say, so let's get straight to it. So, straight out the bat, is Season 2 good? I would say it's actually a brilliant piece of fantasy television, and a huge step up from Season 1. In terms of story, characters, monster design, visual effects, everything. It's just better than Season 1. And there's no weird, confusing, multiple timelines. And the show even took the piss out of that. I appreciate the fact they took the piss out of themselves for all the mistakes in Season 1. This time though, the story is much more linear, and you can follow it. And that's the biggest critique from Season 1, because a lot of casual fans, and even some people that knew about The Witcher, they got lost because we were jumping all over the place, from scene to scene. But they have learned a lesson, and it's paying off. But with other parts of the story, and other critiques, not so much. But we will get to that in a minute. So we'll quickly talk about the story and the characters. Season 2 is mostly adapting Blood of Elves, the first Witcher novel anyway, because you've got Last Wish and The Sword of Destiny, 2 volumes of short stories, and then Blood of Elves, which is the first Witcher novel. And this is when the story really picks up, especially involving Ciri, and the continent's plan for her. And that's what we're kicking off here. But we're also going back into the short stories, because we did miss out on a few. For example, A Grain of Truth, which is one of my favourite, is the very first episode. And this is all about a character called Nilfgaard, who's played by Christopher Headju, who you'll remember from Game of Thrones as Tormund. And he looked brilliant, acted brilliant, amazing guest appearance. But when he transformed back into a human, I noticed he shaved off his beard, and he just looks so different. Just shows you how a beard can make a guy look so different. But yeah, it was a great start to Season 2. But obviously, there were some changes from the books, because Ciri is not in A Grain of Truth. This is one of the very first short stories. Ciri's not even born at this point. But I think they handled her inclusion brilliantly. Like, Season 2 deviates from the books a lot. Even more than Season 1, which was doing that with Yennefer's backstory and all the new stuff. But Season 2, that's a whole other level. And some of the changes and additions work wonders. They change the plot in a positive way, whilst other changes and additions left me somewhere between bewildered and annoyed. But I will say this before we get into that. This is a Netflix adaptation of a Polish story. It was always going to get Americanized. Hollywood was always going to get its clutches into it. And it was never going to be a word-for-word retelling of the books. Sometimes what works on page doesn't always work on screen. Guys, I've told you that for years. But I'm a huge fan of the Witcher books, the games, and the show. But I think for me, even though I've got complaints and critiques, I'm able to separate myself from each of the 3. I can view them as individual versions of the same universe. Like, the books are the original, definitive version, but the show and the games are their own separate entities. And in each of these adaptations, we can make changes. Either because the person making it has a different vision, wants to explore new themes, or because, like I say, what works on page doesn't always work on screen. And the games themselves, that's a different animal. And speaking of the games, we know this show has taken a huge influence from the games. But Season 1 kind of shied away from saying that. During the press tours, it was always, well, we're adapting the books. The games are awesome, but this is the books. But for Season 2, they just don't care. From the characters, the story, all the way to the actual wolf medallion and Geralt's original swords from the game, Witcher 3, they're in the Witcher Armory. But yeah, there's no surprise the show has taken influence from the games, because the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is the reason for the resurgence of popularity in the Witcher series. Why it's so popular over here in the UK, America, and wherever. And it's why Netflix picked up this show. It's why it's been made. Because that game made so much money. And fantasy was hot after Game of Thrones. And there was an open market for it. And speaking of the Wild Hunt, yep guys, that was the Wild Hunt in the finale. Who, if you've read the books and played the games, you know there's more to them than meets the eye. But in the books, they're not the biggest plot point compared to The Witcher 3, where they are the main villains. They're still important in the books, but I expect on the show they'll have a much larger role, closer to the games, where they are a massive force. Because you don't end a season of television with something like that without further exploring it in the future. And I think we'll all be happy with that, because the Wild Hunt are brilliant, especially once you get to know what's really going on, and how they're connected to Ciri and the Elder Blood. And I think that's going to go for the Witchers at Kaer Morhen as well. Their roles are going to be expanded, especially Vesemir, who's insanely popular. But his book appearances are sparse, he's really only in Blood of Elves. And the show has covered all of that. But in Season 2, he was a major character, with new plotlines, new story, and I expect more in the future, because guys, they made an anime prequel about him, a movie, Nightmare of the Wolf, which is so connected to this because there's so many Easter eggs in that, references to that movie, you have to watch it. It will enhance Season 2 so much. Kim Bodnia plays him brilliantly, and I've read he studied the character from the book and the games because he wanted to stay true to the character, to Vesemir, and also respect Henry Cavill's passion for the story. And guys, I love it when Vesemir calls Geralt Wolf. And Henry Cavill is Geralt, what can I say? He's the man. I think he's the only one that can play Geralt. If he wasn't Geralt, this show would be so different. And we all know how much he loves the character, the story, the books, the games, the universe. He's a massive Witcher fan, and it shows in his performance. Like, he's talked about wanting to add more dialogue, like in the books. And he's fought hard to make sure that Geralt was true to the source material. And it pays off on screen. And I know not everyone loves the showrunner's vision, or the writing, but can we fault Henry Cavill as Geralt? He's taken inspiration from the books, the games, and added his own to it. And that goes for the rest of the cast as well. I feel these actors poured their heart and souls into these characters. Especially Freya Allan as Ciri, who I think was the star of Season 2. When they cast her in Season 1, she looked like the part, but once we got into the episodes, I kind of felt she was the weakest of the three, of Geralt, Yennefer and Ciri. But I think that's because we're dealing with a time where Ciri shouldn't be a main character, and the fact we've got the jump in timelines, it didn't help, and most of Ciri's stuff was new material. For example, the Doppelmaus sack, which was absolute bullshit. But yeah, in Season 1, Ciri was not my favourite character, whereas in the books, I absolutely love her. She is my favourite character in the entire Witcher series. And we've gotten to that level in Season 2. Freya Allan as Ciri is awesome. She feels and looks like Ciri from the books, and a bit of the games as well. Obviously, she is older than the character in the books, but that's fine. That's what usually happens to younger characters in shows like this, especially fantasy with adult themes. And you can really feel the chemistry between her and Geralt. Their bond is absolutely perfect. And like I said, Freya Allan as Ciri was a standout star for Season 2 for me, and there's a lot of tough competition, so that is a compliment. But we have to talk about Yennefer, who I absolutely adored in Season 1. She was my star of Season 1, but for Season 2 I struggled with her. Obviously, most of her storyline here is new stuff, because after Sodden, Yennefer is not a big deal. The story focuses on Geralt and Ciri for a while, then Yennefer comes back into it. So they've made their own stuff up after Sodden. And I kind of liked what they were doing with the fact she lost her chaos and was unable to perform magic. She sacrificed what meant most to her. And I like how it made her struggle through so many challenges that, as a mage, she could easily overcome. And in the first season, she fought so hard to gain all this power, but now she's lost it all. And she has to get by without it, and I thought that was a cool dynamic. Like in the books, after Sodden, Yennefer is blinded, and that is referenced in here. But I suppose losing her magic works better, because that's all she has really. But what I didn't like was the fact that she was going to give Ciri to the Deathless Mother, to Vesemir, to get that chaos back. And I get what they were trying to do, because Yennefer thinks magic is the most important thing in the world. That's what defines her, and without it, she's nothing. But to sacrifice Ciri, I get it that she hadn't bonded with Ciri yet, and she didn't understand the love that Geralt has for his child of surprise, but I just did not like it. In the end, she does have a change of heart. Once she spends time with Ciri, sees the bond that Ciri has with Geralt, and starts to develop her own bond with her. She even sacrifices herself to save Ciri. But come on guys, don't tell me you didn't kind of hate Yennefer at one point. And all that shit that went down at Kaer Morhen, that kind of was Yennefer's fault in a way. And even though that stuff doesn't happen in the books, it was pretty gripping. Kaer Morhen is a huge part of this season. It's the home of Geralt, Vesemir, and the Witcher brothers, led by Lambert and Cohen. And on the show, it's much more than just training and bonding with the family, discovering Ciri's abilities, sending help for Triss, sending her away to learn more about herself, control her magic. And it seems like on the show that Ciri's blood can be used to recreate the mutagens, to make new Witchers, which we'll probably discover more about in the Witcher prequel, Blood Origin, which does have a teaser at the end of episode 8. And I don't think this was in the book. Did they ever make a connection between the Elder Blood and the Witchers? But towards the end, it got a bit crazy because Vesemir was going to kill Ciri, the possessed Ciri, for murdering his Witcher sons. And I'm not sure how I feel about it because it's just so vastly different. Obviously in the end it's all forgiven, but I kind of wish we got more of Ciri and Uncle Vesemir. I wanted him to give her more Witcher history and monster lessons. And speaking of monsters, there's a lot in this season. And The Witcher has always been much more than just Geralt's day job killing monsters for coin. But I like how Season 2 added monsters to the plot. Because what did they say with the monoliths? They were gateways to other spheres. And when Ciri breaks them with her screams of her powers, monsters come through. So I find that was a very cool way of adding monsters to the main plot. And at the same time adding a lot of mystery to Ciri's story and the Elder Blood. But some of the changes at Kaer Morhen I did not like. Obviously in the finale there's all the stuff with Vesemir, the monsters, all the Witchers die and the possessed Ciri, and Vesemir wanting to kill her. But what really annoyed me was Eskel. And I know from one of my previous videos that's getting a lot of views, you guys feel the same. I absolutely hated Eskel being infected by the Leshen and being killed off for no reason. I knew it was coming because I read this a long time ago, but I didn't like it one bit. Like, Eskel's not a major character in the books, but this is nonsense. It's just bad, 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 and I wish it never happened. And I get what they were trying to do, but it just didn't work for me. Eskel is hugely popular from the games, and if we're just counting the books, he survives the whole series. But this Netflix version was just so awful. I know he was an ass because he was infected by the Leshy. They had that flashback to him and Geralt where they were buddies. And his death, of course, was a big deal, but I suppose they just wanted a known Witcher to be killed off. But not like this, not like this. And what was the payoff? Because the Leshy that infected him, the Eskel chopped off its right hand, was it? Or left hand? Can't remember. There was no payoff because the Leshy is just killed off by another monster, by the Myropod. It doesn't do anything. It looks fantastic, and then it's just killed off. What the fuck? Again, like I said, some changes work, some don't. But I think that's what Season 2 is going to be known for. Because there's massive deviations from the books. Some are good, some are bad. For example, all the dealings with Vesemir, the Deathless Mother, that's not in the books. But it is inspired by Baba Yaga, who is a witch, I believe, that's imprisoned in a house. And the house is chicken legs. And that's all in the show. But the show has expanded her role massively and made her the main villain, working in the background, working in the shadows, manipulating Francesca Findabar, Fringilla Vigo, and Yennefer. She feeds off the pain and suffering, and when there's enough, she'll escape, and she takes over Ciri's body. And I believe she wants to go back to her own sphere, and that's where they bump into the Wild Hunt. And was it just me, or did she, link up with the Wild Hunt? Did she possess one of them? Or I'll need to watch it back. Guys, I've only watched this once. That's why I'm not doing an in-depth analysis. But yeah, the three lovely ladies have huge roles. Francesca and the discrimination and persecution of elves is a huge part of Season 2. And at times it's difficult to watch, like when that human guy made the elf piss himself, and all the other bad stuff that went on. It's tough. Sometimes The Witcher gets into racism, discrimination, segregation, all these themes pretty hard. And it's a reflection on the real life because it's not just fantasy. And this is a part of the books. Non-humans are treated pretty shittily in the human kingdoms. But this went to a whole other level. And her baby, man, that was brutal. And if I remember correctly, Emhyr at the end says he was the one that ordered the assassin to kill the first pure elven baby in generations. But Francesca thinks it was Redania, now she's attacking them. But because Emhyr has admitted this, or at least to his followers anyway, is this going to get back to Francesca? Because how is that going to affect what goes on in the books? But yeah, I think all the stuff with Francesca and the elves was a great addition, but it does leave me with a few questions. But yeah, we have to talk about Emhyr. They revealed who Emhyr was in Season 2 much earlier than the books, because I think Emhyr is revealed as Duny, who is Ciri's father, much later. There's loads of hints, but is it the final book where Geralt figures it out? And I'm wondering if they're going to change Emhyr's intention slightly, because we've played the games, we've read the books, we know that Emhyr wants to have a child with his own daughter, to create a child that's going to save the world, the prophesied child. But how is that going to play out in the show? But I will say this, Emhyr's reveal was brilliant. In case you missed it, when Ciri is possessed by the Deathless Mother, living out her false vision of her past and Sintra of her family, I noticed straight away that Duny did not fade into dust, because he's not really dead. Calanthe faded away, Mousak, Bavetta, they all faded away because they're dead, whereas Duny did not, because he's still alive. And I found that was a minor but brilliant addition. And then we've got Fringilla Vigo, who was the third sorceress contacted by the Deathless Mother. And Fringilla has gotten so much hate since Season 1, but I enjoyed what they've done with her this season. They finally made Nilfgaard feel like an empire, an actual civilization, rather than an evil cult. And guys, the word fuck is used a billion times this season, so here's one more. Thank fuck they changed that Nilfgaardian armour, from the ball sack to actual Imperial armour. The whole premise of Nilfgaard in Season 1 was a mess. But I think for Season 2 they've improved so much. I'm still not really a fan of Cahir because a lot of his stuff is new, being a prisoner of the Brotherhood and all that. But now he's been removed by Emhyr, and Fringilla as well. We might get to see more of a Cahir from the books, but I'm unsure if they're going to change one of his most important characteristics from the books involving Ciri, because there's been no sign of that, has there? So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But yeah, this video is getting very long now, so we're going to wrap it up. But yeah, there's a lot going on in Season 2. Characters all over the continent fighting for position and power, and by the end of Season 2, they're all after Ciri. Emhyr wants Ciri because she's his daughter, but we'll see how the show handles that. Francesca and the elves want the Elder Blood to rebuild their people. The northern kingdoms want to either kill Ciri or control her, and one of the kingdoms, Redania, they also have plans for her, even though it's Philippa Eilhart and Dijkstra pulling the strings, not King Vesemir. And I must say, Graham McTavish as Dijkstra was criminally underused, but he will be back. And we now know why Philippa Eilhart was not shown in the trailers, because she's only in one scene. And it's kind of strange because she's such a huge player in the Brotherhood, but she doesn't seem to be involved with them at all. But Philippa has her own plans for Ciri, likely to be revealed in Season 3. And then there's Ryons, Lydia, and their mysterious master. They've got plans for her as well. They want her blood. And also the Brotherhood, including Tissaia and Triss, they're plotting against Ciri. And we'll quickly talk about Triss and the fact that in the books, she's the 14th member of the Hill. She's the 14th of the Hill that supposedly died. But it seems like Yennefer has stolen that, and I didn't like that one bit. And then there's the new Brotherhood leader, Vilgefortz, who in the books was a massive part of Sodden, whereas in the show, he got bitch slapped by Cahir. But I'll say this, Season 2 is a huge improvement from Season 1 for Vilgefortz. But there's still a long way to go for him to prove himself, so watch this space. I'm not sure if I missed any of the other players that are after Ciri, but obviously then there's Geralt, Yennefer and the Witcher family. Vesemir wants Geralt and Ciri to stay at Kaer Morhen, but Geralt knows that Ciri's got a target on her back now, and all he wants to do is protect Ciri, and that goes for Yennefer as well. And after almost 8 hours of new content, the continent looks very different than it did at the end of Season 1. They've learnt so many lessons from last time, and they faced so many challenges, had to work through lockdowns and restrictions, had to please a huge passionate fan base, and all the other challenges that stood in their way. Overall, Season 2 was what I wanted, and maybe much more. Huge step up from last time, one of the best fantasy TV shows around, but it still has major issues. But I think these issues are mostly around the changes and the additions that will annoy those that have read the books, played the games. But there was nothing that outright made me turn off my television. In fact, I was hooked. Started off great, kinda got a bit slow in the middle, but it finished strong. And overall, it was what I wanted. I just hope that just like in Season 1, they learn from Season 2. But yeah, so hyped, roll on Season 3. But yeah guys, make sure you post your thoughts on The Witcher Season 2. But yeah guys, rambling as always, so thank you so much for watching, subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you soon.